Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about the general election results. I've left it a little later than usual to post this week because I really wanted to wait and let the dust settle a bit after the election. And I think the first thing to say is that what a relief it is that we no longer have a Conservative government. For 8 years, ever since the referendum, we've had governments of utter chaos. We've had inept prime ministers. Johnson, you could say, was probably did more damage to this country than any other individual has ever done before. And we had Truss, and of course poor Sunak, who was frankly out of his depth from day one. And so to see the back of that lot, and to know that we're no longer likely to be a worldwide laughingstock in the way that we have been over these last 8 years, is a good thing. Now, I've been knocking the Tories for the last 3.5 years since I started making these videos, and I've from time to time been quite rude about them because I've had little more than contempt for them. But at the same time, I've never really been able to support Keir Starmer, and this is for one reason only, and that is his stance on the EU. The fact that 3 years ago he said, long before he need have said anything, he said that under his leadership we would never attempt to rejoin the customs union single market, agree to freedom of movement, or try to rejoin the EU. It wasn't going to happen. In the last week or so, to make it absolutely concrete, just prior to the election, he said not in his lifetime. So it's gone from not in his under his leadership to not in his lifetime. So it's absolutely definite. And to all those people who say, well, he's just saying that, really he wants to go back in, but he's going to wait until the second term, I think that's nonsense. I think he has been so emphatic that to actually U-turn, I know he's well known for U-turns, but to U-turn on this now would be very, very difficult for him. I think he does mean it when he says we will never go back into the EU. And my view is, my channel has largely been about Brexit and the consequences of Brexit. My view has been all along that outside of the EU we will never recover. We're on as a result of Brexit, we're on a downward trajectory now, and I don't see any way of stopping that and turning it around. Now, of course, one should congratulate Starmer and the Labour Party for winning the election. I mean, it was a terrific win on paper, certainly. 411 seats, the majority of 147 is extraordinary. It's a huge success. But once you start looking at the figures a little bit more in more detail, you notice two things. One is that the turnout was only 60%. That means that 40% of the people who were eligible to vote didn't vote, and that's one of the lowest turnouts in the last 100 years. I think it's probably second or third lowest in 100 years. And not only that, of the 60% of the population who did turn out to vote, only 34% voted for Labour. And 34% is the lowest proportion of votes for a winning party since Ramsay MacDonald in 1923, over 100 years ago. So an awful lot of people didn't support Labour. In fact, if you look at 60% turnout and 34% voting for Labour, in effect 20% of the population who were eligible to vote voted for Labour, 1/5. So it's not quite the huge victory that appears on paper. And I'm not trying to belittle their achievement. It was a fantastic achievement. Admittedly, that the Conservative Party couldn't have made it easier by constantly slipping up in all the gaffes that Sunak made during the campaign. But even so, what I think it's just the absurdity. This illustrates the absurdity of the first past the post system, which is so unfair. I know, for example, in my constituency, I vote as I always vote, and I always will vote. But I know who's going to win in my constituency, same party that's won it for the last 30 years, and will go on winning it because it's a very, very, very safe Labour seat I live in. And so my vote, in effect, is wasted. Now, under some form of proportional representation, that wouldn't be the case because every vote counts. And when you look at some of the figures, you look at Labour having 411 seats. That's 63% of the seats in Parliament are on a relatively small proportion of people voting for them. It's nonsense. And the parties that really suffer, of course, are the smaller parties. For example, Reform got 5 seats, but under proportional representation, they've got 94 seats. So it's totally unfair, totally unrepresentative, and really it should be changed, and we should all get behind changing it. But the Prime Minister is always the beneficiary of first past the post, and they're never very keen on changing it. So I don't think anything's likely to happen. I know it did come up at the Labour conference. I think it was last year or the year before, and they voted by a large majority to change to PR, but Keir Starmer overruled it. He said no, it wasn't a priority, and he wasn't interested. I'm sure he's not interested now. Now, just comment on some of the results in the general election. I thought one of the good things was that we've seen such bad behaviour, particularly by the Tories, in the last 8 years, and we've seen also during the election campaign, just particularly the Tories trying to build up scare stories about Labour putting up taxes and so on. And we saw Sunak getting ever more desperate and very often not telling the truth during the campaign. And I thought it was really, actually on that subject, if you're a politician trying to get elected, it's very difficult if you're completely honest, because if you go along and say, look, everything's in a terrible mess and we're going to have to increase taxes and nobody's going to vote for you. And if on the other hand, you go along and sort of try and avoid the question and you try and pretend you're not going to put up taxes, well, then people are more likely to vote for you. So, there's a certain amount of dishonesty sort of built into the system. But I thought the great thing after the election was some of the speeches that were given, and I thought they were very, very dignified, a lot of them. I thought Sunak's speech, both in conceding at his when he was at his constituency, and then the next morning outside Downing Street, I thought were both very good speeches and very, as I say, very dignified. I thought likewise that Keir Starmer gave a very nice speech outside Downing Street on Friday morning. I thought of the others. I thought Jeremy Hunt gave a very good speech. I thought that Penny Mordaunt also gave a very gracious and dignified speech too. And I think that kind of reassures you that these people are not all bad. Of course, a lot of them. Braverman and so on, and gave quite different speeches and had all sorts of issues. I thought what was quite interesting was Sir Robert Butland and Grant Shapps both gave rather passionate speeches where they were clearly furious and blamed the disunity in the Tory party for their losses. The most disgraceful of all was Liz Truss, who lost, having had previously had a 26,000 majority. She lost it only by a few votes, but nonetheless, when it came to the announcements, she refused to speak, to give a speech at all. It's the very least you can do, no matter how badly you're defeated. The least you can do is to sort of thank the returning officer and all that stuff. Thank all the people who've campaigned for you. Thank all the people who've voted for you over the previous years. And she did none of that. She just stony faced, and then she walked away. I thought that really summarised as to her what an awful woman she is, and I think probably we will be seeing much more of her from now on. Now, as far as what confronts Starmer, now we've heard, they've been telling us throughout the campaign about what they're going to do, what their priorities are, and so on. Incidentally, I think Starmer has an absolutely first-class team. I think some of these people are really, really excellent and very, very capable. And above all, of course, we know that they're not going to be doing deals to make money for their mates. They're almost certainly going to be pretty honest. So I wish Starmer well. I wish him well in making Brexit work, despite the fact that I think it's impossible to make Brexit work. It's making a sinking ship work. He says he's going to renegotiate the deal. I wish him all the very best with a renegotiated deal, which the EU have said is not renegotiable, and they're not going to renegotiate it. There has been talk from time to time when this has been pointed out that he will try to renegotiate some of the phytosanitary regulations which concern the movement of animals and animal products across the borders, and that he might succeed in, but it'll make very, very little, if any, difference whatsoever. He says, and I wish him well with it, he's going to sweep away a lot of the bureaucracy that obstructs trade between us and the EU. There's very, very little of that bureaucracy that he can do away with. It's a bureaucracy that applies to any third country that is outside of the EU. I wish him all the best in encouraging foreign investment, because people have not been investing in the UK very much at all since Brexit, and except where the government has dished out huge amounts of money, like giving 500 million to Tata and so on. I think that's going to be a really tall order, because if you're asking companies from the Far East or from America, so to come and set up in Europe to supply the European market, I mean, you're really not likely to choose a country surrounded by bureaucratic barriers and barriers to trade. So I think that's going to be pretty difficult, and I wish him all the best in improving productivity, because our productivity is a big problem. Now, productivity can only increase if you spend money on education, on training, and if you invested in machinery and technology, and all that takes a lot of time. And I wish him all the best in training up doctors and nurses and other specialists and professionals to replace the many who are leaving the country and have been leaving the country, and to make up for lots of the shortages we have throughout all sorts of sectors of the economy. And I wish him success in persuading people who don't want to go out and dig potatoes and do all those sort of menial jobs that people from the EU used to do, and that we've been until now we've been getting people from places like Vietnam to do, although it's going to be much more difficult in future. And so I think, whilst I wish him all the very best, it's like wishing the best to somebody who's about to run a 100-metre race with a fridge on their back. I mean, Brexit and being outside of the EU is such a handicap. It's going to be impossible for anybody to do much about. And they made it quite clear that the only spending will be spending which has already been accounted for, and which is going to be paid for by taxes on or doing away with the non-dom status and taxes on energy companies and so on, and any other spendings that have to come from growth in the economy. Well, I just don't see it. I'm sorry, I just don't see how you're going to grow this economy in its present state. It seems to me that it can grow, but it's going to take a very, very long time. And I'm afraid that people will run out of patience very quickly. People have talked about Starmer's honeymoon being only a few weeks. I think it's probably going to be days. I think it's going to be very, very soon. People are going to start saying, don't forget, 80% of the population didn't vote for Labour. People are going to start saying, well, come on then, what's happening? Well, things aren't any better. And once they start putting up taxes if they have to, then, the challenges are so overwhelming. When you look at the state of the NHS, you look at the local authorities going bust, you look at the schools, you look at the courts, you look at the prisons, all problems that need money. And as they acknowledge, the only way to get that money is to grow the economy, and to grow the economy will take a very, very long time. So all I'm saying really is that thank God we've got rid of the Tories, and thank God we've got an honest government, but I think this government is going to have a very, very difficult time and are very quickly going to become pretty unpopular. But there it is. They're going to be here for 5 years, and so I think we should all cross our fingers and hope for the best. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed. And if you haven't already subscribed and you're not cross about me criticising Keir Starmer, I'd be grateful if you would consider subscribing. And so until next time, thank you for watching, and bye for now.